think it's not unique to say that the majority of the best things that happen at conferences often happen in between the sessions. The people you meet at the sessions, the conversations you have about the sessions. I often think that as someone who speaks at many conferences, that my job is to be provocative enough that I give people lots of things to talk about in between the session and the next one, right? So that because that's where you meet people, that's where you make connections, and that's, and I think that's what leads to the overall learning experience. I don't know if I prefer one or the other. It kind of depends on who's doing it. You know, even in education research, you know, there's a lot of people who say, you know, we shouldn't have the stage on the stage lectures, and we need more hands-on learning and workshops. And I've always sort of been under the impression that I've seen just as many bad lectures as I have very bad workshops. So, and I've seen very good ones of both also. And so the question is really whether or not the speakers or the facilitator is skilled at doing it, not that whether one's better or worse. Sometimes a workshop is an excuse to not teach anyone anything, and that's terrible. And sometimes a lecture is there for just the lecturer to read his own or her own slides, and that's pretty terrible also. So again, I think it depends on what they're doing. Some people are fantastic at one, and some people are fantastic at the other. Okay, that's a very complicated question. Well, I think there's a question of hearing things that on the one hand stop you in your tracks, right? So you know, you don't learn anything if it's so clear and exactly what you expected. Then you already knew it. You know, when I'm teaching in a classroom and a student says, "I'm confused," I usually go, "Oh, good, oh, good. That means you're learning something." Because if you're not confused, sometimes, you know, when everything makes sense, then you're probably just confirming what you already believe to be true. So it's good when you feel a little bit jarred, when things are jarring and confusing. And so I think that it's good when there are when that happens. But then the question becomes, can you take this jarring idea and incorporate it somehow into your sense of self and your sense of what it means to live in the world with others, and can you make that meaningful? And that's a whole other kind of challenge. And so I think the best learning happens when both of those things are going on. You sort of, on the one hand, are knocked out of your ordinary context, and then you're able to reintegrate it afterwards. Yeah, I think that's pretty much how it is everywhere. I think that's true, but I don't think that, you know, I've done a lot of work on learning through play and game-based learning, and a lot of people always say, "Oh, learning should be fun," and I always say, well, I don't know about that. I mean, you know, when you're playing a game, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of crisis moments. That's what makes things engaging. Fun is not the same as engaging. I'm all for fun. Believe me, I'm all for fun. But I think the learning happens in those moments of crisis, and I don't think anyone. And by crisis, I don't mean big giant crisis. I just mean confusion. I just mean those moments of feeling disoriented a bit. And nobody likes it. If we liked it, we wouldn't need teachers. We'd just do it to ourselves all day. If we liked it, we wouldn't need writers. We wouldn't need thinkers. We wouldn't need artists. Right? We need those things because we would all love to just keep everything as comfortable as possible all the time, and should be grateful to those people who knock things loose for a moment for us, even though in the moment we're never grateful. I think most people know that too, though. You know, if you think about that, if you think back in the history of your own personal life, usually the best learning moments are moments when that you hated at the time. You know, you hated it. You can think about this in terms of romance. I never met anyone who went through a terrible breakup and didn't say, "Yes, but I learned so much about myself afterwards." That doesn't mean it didn't break your heart and hurt and leave you splattered all over the ground for a few months. But nevertheless, that's how we learn about ourselves, and that's how we learn about the world. I think it's a bit short-sighted to say you can't learn things online. I think that's a very what's the right blunt, and I mean that in a negative way, right? Like that's a very blunt, naive way to think about things. There will be many things I think about as we get better and better at online communication that we do get out of conferences that we will be able to do online. But there'll certainly be some things that we will never be able to do. And my hope would be that as that happens, we build conferences that create more opportunities for those things that are unique to in-person experiences. I used to say all the time, for example, just in education in general, that we need more technology in education, but maybe not more technology in the classroom, right? Like when you're face to face with a teacher, this is a very special opportunity, and that's great. But it's not one or the other. These things, I don't understand why we talk about them so often as polarized. We have both. Why don't we get the most out of each one and not try to go which one's better than the other, right? Imagine if I was to say, if you were to ask me a question like, well, now that we have automobiles, do you think we should stop walking? No, we do both. We walk when it's the best time to walk, and we use automobiles when it's the best time to use automobiles, and that's the beauty of human technology in general. And I think, online learning and education technology and learning with digital technology will actually be incorporated into our lives when we stop having the question of one versus the other and start going, what should we use this for, and what should we use the face-to-face for, and when do we use each one, and why? I think people will always find reasons that we need to have conferences in person, and we'll also be able to eliminate some of the bad parts of conferences by having them online. One of the things I think is interesting, I think people are actually going to conferences more now than they used to. That conferences have become very social and more popular, and maybe that's partially because the online world has allowed us to see more about speakers and then want to learn more about it. Maybe it's about the possibilities for marketing. I don't really know why it is. But I think we're going to see more and more people continue to participate in these things, and I think we're going to see much more nuanced kinds of conversations at them. Right? I think we're just learning that there's a place for a conference, for example, where many educators meet. So I think we'll be able to get that down to a very sort of precise ways of being able to help each other and find conversations. I don't know whether that means subject-specific nuances. I don't know. But it certainly is. It's certainly. I think they're going to get bigger, and maybe they won't get bigger, but there's going to be more of them. There's going to be more and more conferences. I talk to people all the time who love them. I'm a little bit jaded. I go to so many that I'm not really excited. But I do remember that at the very first few that I went to, thinking, wow, this is such an opportunity to learn so much from so many different kinds of people that I wouldn't interact with in a normal, in my everyday life. And so I think for people who aren't crazy like me, who don't go to a conference almost every month, I can see how it's still a very, very special opportunity. And I hope that everybody has an opportunity to do it. And I think especially educators should have an opportunity to do it, because there's something very powerful about discovering how broad and universal the things that you're thinking about are, right? That they're not that your problems and your concerns and your questions and your confusions are not as unique or specific to your context as you think. I think that's something that feels very beautiful and gives you new ways to think about things. I know for me, just discovering that so many parts of the world are asking so many similar questions has been a very powerful sort of opportunity to understand the world, to see that the same conversation is happening in so many places. Again, I said I'm jaded, so a little bit of me, I walk in and I go, oh yeah, I've heard that conversation before. But I also think it's sort of beautiful that it's happening everywhere, because it tells me that humanity as a whole is our thinking is transforming. I don't know if it's getting better. I don't know if it ever gets better, but I know that it changes, and it's clear that we're changing. We might just change to another thing with new problems and solve some of the old ones and produce new ones, but that's good. That's what we have to do. That's what it means to be a person, I think.